The email landed in my inbox like a grenade. I saw the subject line, "Wedding details, Sarah and Michael," and my heart did a little flip. Finally. It had been a whirlwind since Sarah and Michael announced their engagement a few months ago, and I'd been waiting for my role to be made official, a role I'd been rehearsing for since the day she was born, since the day I first held that tiny, perfect hand. I clicked it open, a smile already forming on my face. The address was a beautiful garden venue in Santa Barbara, one I remembered Sarah talking about years ago. The date was set for a Friday in October. Everything was coming together. I scrolled down, past the RSVP link and the registry information, looking for the timeline of the ceremony. That's when I saw it. The little section under processional. Officiant, Pastor Thomas Maid of Honor, Jessica Chen. Best man, Daniel Brooks. Mother of the bride, Laura Miller. Father of the bride, David Miller. The words blurred. I reread it. Father of the bride, David Miller. David Miller, my ex-wife's husband, the man who had been in Sarah's life for less than a decade, the man who wasn't her father. I felt a cold wave wash over me, a physical shock that made my hands tremble. It was a mistake, it had to be. I closed the email and opened it again, hoping the words would rearrange themselves, that my name would magically appear where his was. But they didn't. The letters were stark and final. David Miller. My mind raced. How could she do this? We had talked about it, or at least I thought we had. A few months ago, after they announced the engagement, Sarah and I had a quick conversation on the phone. "Dad, I want you to walk me down the aisle," she'd said, her voice full of that casual affection that could mend any of our long-distance silences. "Of course, sweetheart. There's nothing I'd want more." I had hung up feeling a sense of peace, a certainty that despite the years, the distance, and the divorce, our bond was as strong as ever. I had a daughter. She loved me. She needed me. But now, this. The email felt like a public declaration, a betrayal not just of me, but of every memory we shared. The scraped knees I kissed better, the late-night talks about boys and school, the countless hours I spent helping her with math homework she swore she'd never use. It was all a prelude to this one moment, a moment I was now being denied. I put my phone down on the table, the screen still lit up with the words that felt like a punch to the gut. The afternoon sun, so warm and inviting moments before, now felt thin and distant. The silence in my apartment in Los Angeles, a city that usually thrummed with life, was deafening. I thought of David, the man who stepped into my life and took up residence. He was a good guy, I had to admit. Calm, steady, the kind of man who could fix anything around the house and always had a gentle word. He was what I wasn't. I was impulsive, passionate, sometimes a little lost in my own head. My job as an architect, which required creativity and endless problem-solving, left me drained and often distant from the small domestic moments that David seemed to excel at. He was the safe harbor. I was the storm. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a mistake on the wedding planner's part. Maybe Sarah didn't look at the details before they were sent out, but a sinking feeling in my stomach told me otherwise. This was intentional. This was a choice. My daughter chose him over me. A wave of anger, sharp and hot, rose in my throat. I wanted to call her, to demand an explanation. How could you do this, Sarah, after everything? But what would I say? You've hurt my feelings. It felt petty. It felt small. And the truth was, it was more than just hurt feelings. It was a fear that I had been replaced, not just as a figure in her life, but as her father. I remembered a conversation I'd had with my ex-wife, Laura, a few years after the divorce. We were at Sarah's high school graduation. "He's been a great father figure to her, Mark," Laura had said, her voice soft but firm. "He's been there for the things you couldn't be." At the time, I brushed it off. I was her biological father. That was a title no one could take away. But now it felt like it had been stripped from me piece by piece, until nothing was left but a polite invitation to a ceremony where I would be just another guest in the crowd. I paced my small living room, the Persian rug feeling rough beneath my bare feet. The city outside seemed to mock me, the endless hum of traffic a reminder of a world that was moving on without me. I stared at the framed photo on my bookshelf, a picture of a 6-year-old Sarah, her gap-toothed smile radiating pure joy. She was holding a drawing of a house, one I had helped her sketch. "This is for you, Daddy," she had said. "Our house." I was a father then. I was everything. Now I was just a ghost, a memory from a different life. The anger subsided, replaced by a hollow, aching sadness. I knew I couldn't just sit here and let this happen. I had to talk to her, not to fight, but to understand. I needed to know why. Why him? Why not me? The questions were a weight in my chest, heavy and impossible to ignore. So I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over Sarah's name in my contacts. It was time for a difficult conversation, one that would either mend a broken bond or break it for good. My thumb hovered over the call button for what felt like an eternity. The screen seemed to burn with Sarah's name. My heart hammered against my ribs, a dull, insistent drum. I had rehearsed the conversation in my head a dozen times, each version ending in a different flavor of disaster. Accusatory, pleading, or just plain pathetic. I took a deep breath, letting the cool Los Angeles air fill my lungs, and finally pressed it. The line rang, once, twice. Each ring felt like a judgment. "Hey, Dad!" Her voice was bright, cheerful, full of the same innocent optimism that had always been a hallmark of her personality. It was a voice that didn't know the ache she had just inflicted. It made it even harder. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, my own voice coming out a little too strained. "I just got the email about the wedding." "Oh yeah, isn't it great? Michael's so excited. The venue is gorgeous and the caterer is amazing. Did you see the menu options?" She rattled on, blissfully unaware of the landmine I was standing on. "Yeah, I saw it," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It all looks beautiful." I paused, letting the silence hang in the air, hoping she would fill it with some kind of explanation. She didn't. I had to be the one to bring it up. The words felt like sandpaper in my mouth. "I have a question about the processional, Sarah." "Oh?" Her voice shifted, a subtle change that told me she knew what was coming. The cheerfulness was gone, replaced by a cautious defensiveness. "It says David is walking you down the aisle." I couldn't say the words instead of me. The implication was enough. There was a long silence on her end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background, a testament to her being in her own world, a world where this decision made perfect sense. "Yeah, we decided on that," she finally said, her voice soft. It was the "we" that stung the most. "It was a joint decision." "A joint decision," I repeated, the incredulity seeping into my tone. "Sarah, you told me a few months ago that I was going to walk you down the aisle. You told me it was my day." "Dad, it's not like that," she said, her voice now tinged with frustration. "This is my wedding. It's not about you." That's when the dam broke. The anger, the hurt, the years of feeling like a visitor in her life, all of it came pouring out. "It's not about me. Are you serious, Sarah? I'm your father. I raised you. I was there for you when David was just some guy from a coffee shop. How can you just replace me?" "I didn't replace you," she shot back, her voice rising. "He's been there for me too, Dad. He's been there for all the big moments you missed. He was there for my high school graduation when you were in New York for a client meeting. He taught me how to drive. He was there when I got my first broken heart. He's a part of our family now." Her words were a series of well-aimed blows, each one landing with a painful precision. She was right. I hadn't been there for her graduation. The architectural firm I worked for had a massive project in Manhattan, and the deadline was non-negotiable. I had sent flowers and a heartfelt card, and I thought she understood. I thought she knew how much I loved her, how every choice I made was for her future. But apparently a card wasn't enough to make up for a missed memory, and David, with his steady, quiet presence, had been there. He had filled the gaps I left behind. "I'm sorry I wasn't perfect, Sarah. I'm sorry my job required me to travel," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. "But being a father isn't about being there for every single moment. It's about being there when it counts. And this counts. This is a moment I've waited for my entire life. And what about me, Dad? What about what I want? She said, her voice now raw with emotion. I want David to walk me down the aisle. He's a part of my story too, and I want him to be a part of this moment with me. I'm not asking you to not be a part of the wedding. I'm asking you to just be there, as my dad. The line went silent again. The "as my dad" part was a twist of the knife. It was a plea, a demand, and an excuse all in one. She wanted me there, but on her terms. She wanted the title, but not the role. She wanted me to be a witness to her choosing someone else. My anger faded, replaced by an overwhelming sense of defeat. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She was a woman, a bride, and she was making her own choices. And her choices didn't always include me in the way I wanted them to. I was a part of her past, a cherished memory, but David was a part of her present. And the present was what she was walking into, down that aisle with a man who was not her father. "Okay," I said, the word a whisper. "Okay, I understand." "Are you okay?" she asked, a tentative softness in her voice. "I will be," I lied. I just need some time to process." "I love you, Dad," she said, her voice a little shaky now. "I love you too, sweetheart," I replied, and hung up the phone before I could say anything else I would regret. The silence returned to my apartment, but it was different this time. It wasn't just quiet. It was filled with the deafening sound of a dream dying. My dream. I looked at the picture of the little girl with the gap-toothed smile. It was a relic from a different time, a time when I was the only man in her world, and now I was just one of many. The days following the phone call were a blur. I went to work, but my mind was a million miles away, replaying the conversation with Sarah over and over. Every time I thought about it, a new layer of pain would reveal itself. It wasn't just the betrayal or the feeling of being replaced. It was the realization that I had let this happen. I was the ghost in my daughter's life. I was there, but not really. I flew in for holidays. I called on her birthday. I sent thoughtful gifts. But David was a living, breathing presence. He was there to help her with her college applications, to celebrate her promotions, to offer a steady hand when she moved into her first apartment. I was an architect of buildings, but David was an architect of a life that I had been absent from. The city of Los Angeles, with its endless sunshine and relentless energy, felt like a foreign country. I walked the familiar streets of my neighborhood, the bustling cafes, the sprawling parks, the people jogging with their dogs. But I felt disconnected from all of it. The vibrancy I usually found in the urban landscape was gone, replaced by a dull, grey apathy. I couldn't focus on my designs. The lines on the blueprints felt meaningless, a series of geometric shapes with no purpose. I was building things for other people, for other families, but my own had a hole in it. I started to remember all the times I had chosen my career over her. The late nights in the office, the missed school plays, the cancelled vacations. Each memory was a small nail in the coffin of our relationship. I had rationalized it all at the time. It's for our future, I told myself, so I can provide for her. But what was the point of providing for a future if you weren't a part of it? David had provided something I couldn't: time. He had given her his presence, a commodity more valuable than any paycheck I could ever earn. I thought about my own father. He was a good man, a factory worker who came home every day, tired and smelling of grease, but always there. He taught me how to throw a baseball, how to change a tire. He wasn't a hero, but he was a constant. I had tried to be a better version of him, a more successful one, but in my pursuit of success, I had lost sight of what truly mattered. I had become a different kind of absent father. My phone rang. It was Laura, my ex-wife. I hesitated before answering. Our conversations were usually polite, strained, and brief. I wasn't sure I could handle her sympathy, or worse, her knowing smile. "Mark," she said, her voice soft. "Yeah, Laura," I replied, my voice hoarse. "I know you talked to Sarah," she said gently. "She's upset." "She's upset?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. I'm the one who's been replaced, Laura. Don't you think I have a right to be upset? Mark, this isn't about replacing you, she said, her tone firm. It's about Sarah having a family now, a whole family. David is as much a father to her as you are. He's been there for her in a way you couldn't be. Not because you didn't want to, but because of circumstances. You were busy with work, with your own life. And he was just there. He filled a gap. A gap I created, I muttered. Yes, she said, and her honesty was a blow. A gap you created, and now you're upset that someone else filled it. You can't just show up for the big moments and expect to have a front row seat. You have to be there for the small ones too, the moments no one sees, the moments that build a life. Her words were like a surgeon's scalpel, cutting through the layers of my pride and revealing the raw, festering wound beneath. I had been so focused on my own pain that I hadn't considered hers or Sarah's. The divorce wasn't just a breakup, it was a reordering of a family. And in that reordering I had been relegated to a different, less central role. I hung up the phone, the conversation replaying in my mind. Laura was right. I was a ghost. And now, I was being forced to confront the life that had gone on without me, the life my daughter had built with someone else. I walked over to the window, the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. The air was cool and crisp, a relief from the day's warmth. I watched as cars drove by, 1,000 different stories contained within each one. I thought about the families inside them, the fathers, the mothers, the children, the everyday moments they were sharing, the quiet intimacies that I had missed. I had to do something. I couldn't just stand here and be a ghost. I couldn't just show up to the wedding and be a polite spectator. I had to find a way to be a father again, to be a presence in her life, not just a memory. But I had no idea where to start. The road to her heart felt longer and more convoluted than any highway I had ever designed. And for the first time in my life, I was completely lost. The only logical thing to do was go back, not to change the past, but to understand it. I booked a flight to San Jose, the city where Sarah grew up, the city where I had built our family home and then left it. The flight was short, but the journey felt like a lifetime. As the plane descended through the hazy California sky, I looked out the window at the familiar sprawl of suburbs, each one a collection of homes, of lives, of memories. The rental car was a faceless sedan, a far cry from the old station wagon we used to pile into for weekend trips. I drove through the streets, the scenery a strange mix of the familiar and the new. The old coffee shop where Laura and I first met was now a trendy juice bar. The park where I taught Sarah how to ride her bike had a new, modern playground. The city had grown up, just as my daughter had. I drove to our old house, the one I had designed myself. It was a beautiful place, a modern interpretation of a craftsman, with a sprawling front porch and a big backyard. I saw it from the street, and my breath caught in my throat. It looked exactly the same big oak tree in the front yard, the same well-maintained lawn. A different family lived there now. I saw a little girl on the swing set in the backyard, her hair flying in the breeze. A pang of longing shot through me. I remembered pushing Sarah on that very swing, her laughter echoing through the air. It felt like a lifetime ago. I parked a few blocks away and walked, a ghost haunting my own memory lane. I found myself at the public library, a place Sarah and I used to go on rainy Saturdays. We would get lost in the stacks, the smell of old paper and ink, a comforting scent. I found the children's section, a place where I used to sit cross-legged on the floor, reading stories about dragons and knights to a wide-eyed little girl. I ran my hand over the spines of the books, each one a silent witness to a time when I was the center of her universe. As I walked out of the library, I saw a familiar face across the street. It was Jessica, Sarah's maid of honor, her best friend since they were toddlers. I remembered her with a bright, mischievous smile, always a partner in crime for Sarah's latest scheme. She was sitting at a cafe, nursing a cup of coffee and looking at her phone. She looked older, of course, but the mischievous spark was still there in her eyes. I almost turned and walked away, but something made me stop. She was a link to Sarah, to a version of her I hadn't seen in years. I walked over to her table. "Jessica, is that you?" She looked up, startled, And then her eyes widened in recognition. "Mark, wow, I haven't seen you in ages. What are you doing here?" "Just visiting," I said, a vague answer that felt like a lie. I pulled up a chair and sat down. "I heard you're the maid of honor. Congratulations." "Thanks," she said, a small smile on her face. "I'm so excited for Sarah. She's so happy." "I know," I said, the words feeling hollow. I was a little surprised to see that David was walking her down the aisle." Jessica's smile faltered. She looked down at her coffee cup, stirring the contents with a small spoon. "Look, Mark," she said, her voice low. "I know this is hard, but David, he's been there. He's a part of her life in a way you haven't been. He's been the one she calls when she has a flat tire. He's the one who helps her with her taxes. He's the one who gives her advice about relationships. He's a good man." "I know he is," I said, the words a confession. I didn't know how much I had missed, how much of her life he's been a part of." "She loves you, Mark. Of course she does. You're her dad," Jessica said, her voice softening. "But you can't be surprised that she wants the man who's been a constant presence in her life for the last 10 years to be a part of this day. He's not a replacement. He's an addition." Her words were a new perspective, one that I had been too blind to see. David wasn't trying to take my place. He was just living his own life, a life that intersected with Sarah's. And in that intersection, he had become a father figure, a friend, a confidant. I had been so busy feeling replaced that I hadn't seen him for what he was, a man who loved my daughter too. I thanked Jessica for the coffee and the brutal honesty. As I walked back to my car, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the sidewalk. I realized I had come here to find answers, to find a reason to be angry. But all I had found was the truth. My pain was real. But so was hers. And so was his. This wasn't a competition. It was just a complicated family trying to find its way. The ghost I was trying to outrun wasn't David. It was me. The man I used to be. The father I could have been. And the only way to move forward was to let go of the past and accept the reality of the present. I drove back to Los Angeles, the city lights of the 405 highway a river of red and white. My mind, which had been a storm of accusations and pain, was now eerily calm. The conversation with Jessica had a sobering effect. It was as if I was watching a movie of my life, but from a different angle, one where I wasn't the star, but a supporting character who had often missed his cues. The days leading up to the wedding were a strange mix of preparation and introspection. I went to a tailor to get my suit fitted. The measurements were a little off, a reminder of the years that had passed, the pounds I had gained, the man I had become. The tailor, an old Italian man with a kind face, asked me, "Is it for your son's or daughter's wedding?" "My daughter's," I said, the words catching in my throat. He smiled. "A special day, a very special day. You must be very proud." I just nodded, a lump in my throat. I decided I needed to talk to David. The thought was terrifying and the last thing I wanted to do, but I knew it was the only way forward. I had to face the man who had been a better version of me in all the ways that counted. I found his number in Sarah's wedding email, a detail that now felt like a taunt. I stared at the phone, my thumb hovering over the call button, just as I had with Sarah. This time there was no hesitation. I pressed it. The phone rang twice before a deep, calm voice answered. "Hello? David? It's Mark," I said. "Mark Miller." The Miller felt like a declaration, a claim to a family I was no longer a central part of. There was a pause. "Mark, I figured you'd call. How are you?" I'm okay," I lied. "Look, I wanted to talk about Sarah and the wedding. I know you're walking her down the aisle." "Yeah," he said, his voice gentle, devoid of any hint of victory. "It was her decision. She asked me a while ago. It's an honor." "I know," I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. "She told me I guess I'm still trying to understand." "It's not easy, Mark," he said. "I get that. I'm not trying to replace you. That's not how any of this works. You're her father. You'll always be her father. I'm just the other guy. The one who's there for her every day." His words hit me like a revelation. The other guy. He wasn't trying to be me. He wasn't a replacement. He was just another part of her life, a part I had been too blind to see. She loves you, Mark, he continued. More than you know. She talks about you all the time, the way you can fix anything, the way you can tell a story, the way you were the first one to teach her how to ride a bike. My heart ached with a strange mix of sorrow and gratitude. He was telling me about my daughter, about my history, things I had been too busy or too self-absorbed to notice. He was a keeper of my daughter's past, a co-curator of her memories. I feel like I miss so much, I said, the words a raw confession. I was so focused on building a career, on providing, that I forgot to build a life with her. It's never too late, Mark, David said, his voice soft but firm. You're still her dad. And she still needs you. She needs you to be proud of her, to be there for her, and she needs you to be happy for her on this day. This is a day about her, not about us, not about who gets to stand where. The phone call ended and I sat in silence, the truth of his words sinking in. David wasn't an enemy. He was a partner in the complicated, beautiful, and sometimes painful business of raising a daughter. He was the one who was there, not because he had to be, but because he wanted to be. And in that unspoken bond, that shared love for the same woman, a new kind of family was being formed. A family that was messy and imperfect, but real. I thought about the wedding. I wasn't walking her down the aisle, but I was still her father. I was still invited, I was still needed. My role had changed, but my love hadn't. I could choose to be a ghost, to haunt the edges of her life, or I could choose to be present, to be a part of the complicated, beautiful tapestry of her new family. The choice was mine. I looked at the framed photo of Sarah on my desk, the gap-toothed smile, the little girl who believed I could do anything. I had let her down, but it wasn't too late to try and make it right. The wedding day dawned with a clear California blue sky, the kind of day that felt like a blessing. I put on the suit I had tailored, the dark navy wool feeling heavy and unfamiliar on my shoulders. I felt more like a stranger in a rented costume than a man about to witness his daughter's most important day. I adjusted my tie in the mirror, the knot feeling tight around my neck. The reflection staring back at me was a man I barely recognized, a man with tired eyes and a heart full of unresolved emotions. I drove the long, winding road to Santa Barbara, the Pacific Ocean sparkling to my left. The drive was a perfect distraction, the beauty of the landscape a temporary balm for my inner turmoil. As I got closer to the venue, a sense of dread began to creep in. The garden was an idyllic setting, a perfect backdrop for a perfect day. But what if my presence cast a shadow on it? What if my pain was visible to everyone? I parked the car and walked toward the entrance, my hands shoved deep into my pockets. The air was filled with the faint scent of flowers and the murmur of conversation. I saw Laura first, in a beautiful flowing dress, her face alight with a mother's pride. She saw me and her smile faltered for a moment, a flash of concern in her eyes. She walked over, her arms open for a hug. "You came," she said, her voice soft. "Of course I came," I replied. "She's my daughter." She squeezed my arm. "She's so happy, Mark. She can't stop smiling." We stood for a moment, two halves of a past life, united by the love for our daughter. The unspoken understanding between us was a comfort. We had both failed in different ways, but we had also both loved, and that love was what had brought us here, to this moment. I saw David next. He was standing near the entrance, looking handsome in a light grey suit, a boutonniere of white roses pinned to his lapel. He was talking to a few guests, his posture relaxed, his smile easy. He saw me and his smile didn't waver. He walked over, his hand outstretched. "Mark," he said, his voice warm and genuine. "I'm glad you're here." I shook his hand, his grip firm and steady. "Congratulations, David." "Thank you," he said. "This is a big day for all of us." "I just wanted to say, thanks for talking to me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "And for everything else, you've been a good father to her." He just nodded, a humble acceptance in his eyes. We both have, in our own ways. His words were a gift, a validation that I had been longing for. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was a man, a father, standing in a garden with another man, and we were both there for the same reason: to see our daughter happy. The ceremony was about to begin. The guests started to take their seats. I found a spot in the third row, next to a few of Laura's relatives I vaguely remembered. I watched as the wedding party began their procession. Jessica, a vision in a lavender dress, walked with a beaming smile. Michael, the groom, stood at the altar, a nervous but happy look on his face. Then the music changed. The notes of Pachelbel's Canon in D filled the air, a melody I had imagined for so long, a soundtrack for a moment I wasn't a part of. My throat tightened and my eyes welled up with tears, but this time they weren't tears of anger or sadness. They were tears of a different kind, tears of acceptance. I saw her then. Sarah. She was a vision in white, a beautiful, confident woman, her face glowing with happiness. She was holding a bouquet of white roses and peonies, and she looked like she had stepped out of a dream. She was walking down the aisle, her arm linked with David's. He was holding her hand, a look of immense pride on his face. He was smiling, a genuine fatherly smile. He wasn't walking her down the aisle to replace me. He was walking her down the aisle because he had earned his place there. I watched them, and a strange sense of peace washed over me. I wasn't walking her down the aisle, but I was here. I was a witness. I was her father. And in that moment I realized that my role wasn't to lead her down a path I had chosen for her, but to stand back and watch her find her own way. And her own way had led her to this day, to this man, to this moment. And she was happy. I let the tears fall, unashamed. The knot in my tie felt a little looser. The heavy suit felt a little lighter. I was a father, but my job was different now. It was no longer about holding her hand, but about letting go. And in that letting go, I finally felt like I was holding on to something real, my love for my daughter. The ceremony unfolded like a beautiful dream. Sarah and Michael stood before the pastor, their hands clasped, their eyes fixed on each other. Their vows were simple, heartfelt, and full of the kind of love that had no room for pretense. They talked about friendship, about shared dreams, about the small moments that make up a life. I listened to Sarah's voice, her words a new and beautiful song. She was no longer the little girl I had known. She was a woman, ready to build her own family, her own life. I watched as Michael's eyes welled up with tears as he spoke of his love for her, and I felt a flicker of something new, not jealousy but a profound sense of gratitude. She had found a good man, a man who would be a constant presence, a steady hand, a man who would be there for the moments I had missed. The pastor, a kind-faced man who looked like he had been a part of this family for years, spoke of the sacredness of marriage, of the journey of two becoming one. He talked about the support of family and friends, about the bonds that hold a life together. I looked at David, who was sitting in the front row with Laura, a quiet and dignified presence. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a villain. He was just a man who had loved my daughter and had been there for her. And for the first time, I felt a genuine sense of camaraderie with him. We were two men from different worlds, united by our love for the same person. The moment came for the exchange of rings. Michael slid the gold band onto Sarah's finger, a simple gesture that held the weight of a lifetime of promises. The moment was charged with emotion, and I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The pain I had carried for weeks, the anger, the hurt, it all seemed to melt away in the warmth of the day. The ceremony ended, and the pastor announced, "I now present to you Mr. and Mrs. Miller." The name Miller felt like a strange echo, a reminder of a past that was both mine and hers. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Sarah and Michael shared their first kiss as husband and wife, a kiss that felt like a beginning, a new chapter in their lives. I stood up clapping, a genuine smile on my face. I watched as they walked back down the aisle, their faces radiant with joy. Sarah caught my eye, and for a fleeting moment, she broke from her husband and came over to me. She threw her arms around my neck, her hug strong and full of emotion. "I love you, Dad," she whispered in my ear. "I love you too, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. She pulled back, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank you for being here. It means the world to me." "I wouldn't have missed it for anything," I said, and for the first time the words felt true. I wasn't here because I had to be. I was here because I wanted to be. I was here for her, to witness her happiness, to be a part of her new life, even if my role was a little different than I had imagined. I watched as she walked away, her hand in Michael's, ready to start their life together. I saw David give her a quick fatherly squeeze as she passed, a silent exchange of love and pride. The unspoken bond between us was now a part of the air, a silent agreement that we were all in this together, a complicated, beautiful mess of a family. I walked to the reception, the heavy suit feeling lighter with every step. The sun was warm on my skin, and the air was filled with the sound of laughter and celebration. I wasn't the man walking her down the aisle, but I was still her father, and that was a title no one could take away. My job wasn't to lead her, but to love her, from the sidelines, from the crowd, from the quiet corner of a family that was no longer just mine. The reception hall was a beautiful chaos of music, laughter, and clinking glasses. The chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the long tables draped in white linen and decorated with lush floral arrangements. The air buzzed with the low hum of conversation, punctuated by the sharp clink of silverware and the periodic roar of laughter. I sat at a table with some of Laura's family, people I hadn't seen in years, making polite small talk. We discussed the weather, the food, and how beautiful Sarah looked in her dress. My responses were automatic, my mind a million miles away, lost in a sea of memories. I was a polite ghost at my own daughter's celebration. Then came the toasts, the moment I had been both dreading and anticipating. The maid of honor Jessica stood up first. A vibrant woman with a quick smile, she looked confident as she tapped on her glass. She spoke of her friendship with Sarah, of the countless sleepovers, the late-night talks, the secrets they had shared. She told a funny story about a disastrous camping trip they took in high school, a tale of a rogue raccoon and a ruined tent that had the crowd erupting in laughter. Her voice was full of genuine affection and respect. She ended her toast with a heartfelt message, a declaration of love and support for her best friend. I watched Sarah smile, her eyes shining with tears. It was clear that she was surrounded by people who loved her fiercely and had been a constant presence in her life. Then David stood up. My heart did a little lurch, a tight knot forming in my stomach. This was the moment he would speak about his love for his daughter, about their shared memories, about the life they had built. I braced myself for a speech that would highlight every single moment I had missed, every gap I had left. I half expected a list of fatherly deeds, the car repairs, the homework sessions, the weekend trips, all of which I had either missed or delegated to my ex-wife. The jealousy, a familiar and bitter taste, crept back into my throat. He cleared his throat, his voice calm and steady, a baritone that commanded attention without demanding it. "Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm David, Laura's husband and Sarah's stepfather." He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "It's an honor to be standing here today, celebrating this beautiful couple. I've been a part of this family for 10 years now, and in that time, I've had the immense privilege of watching Sarah grow and flourish. When I first met her, she was a fierce, independent young woman with a sharp wit and a brilliant mind. She was already half-grown, and I knew my job wasn't to replace anyone, but to just be there, to be a part of her life." He paused, looking at Sarah, a paternal fondness in his eyes that was unmistakable. I remember the first time she called me with a problem. Her car had broken down in the middle of a freeway, 100 miles from home. She was rattled, scared. I dropped everything and drove out to meet her. When I saw her, she was so shaken, so scared. I just put my arm around her, and I told her we would figure it out. And we did. We fixed the car together. In that moment, I realized that being a father wasn't just about the big gestures, the grand declarations. It was about being there for the small, messy moments. It was about showing up. He went on to talk about Michael, about how he had seen their love grow, how he had witnessed their bond strengthen over the years. He spoke of Michael's kindness, his steady presence, and the way he looked at Sarah with such adoration. David's speech wasn't a laundry list of achievements. It was a testament to the quiet, everyday love that had grown between them. He ended his toast with a simple, powerful message. To Sarah and Michael. To a lifetime of showing up for each other. To a lifetime of love and happiness. The crowd applauded. I clapped too, my hands a little numb. His speech wasn't a taunt, it was a testament. It was a testament to his love for my daughter, and to the fact that his love was just as real, just as valid as mine. He had been there for her in a way I couldn't be, and he wasn't afraid to say it. And for the first time, I wasn't angry about it. I was grateful. Grateful for a man who had loved my daughter when I couldn't be there, who had filled the void I had left behind. My turn came. My heart pounded in my chest. I wasn't a natural public speaker, and I hadn't prepared a speech. My plan had been to say a few polite words and sit down. But now, after David's words, I knew what I had to say. I stood up, my hands a little shaky, a lump in my throat. For those of you who don't know me, I began, my voice a little rough. I'm Mark, Sarah's dad. The words felt both foreign and sacred. I looked at her and she smiled, a small encouraging smile. I've waited my whole life for this day. And for a while, I thought I knew exactly what it would be. I thought I'd be walking her down the aisle, and I'd be the one giving the speech about how proud I was. But life doesn't always go according to plan. I looked at Sarah, and then at David, and then at Laura. This day is not what I expected. It's better. It's a testament to the beautiful, messy, complicated family we've all become. Sarah, you are the most incredible woman I know. You are brilliant and kind, and you have a fierce spirit. You have the best of your mother, and I hope, a little bit of me. The words came from a place of raw honesty, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I paused, a lump in my throat, my eyes welling up. I'm so proud of the woman you've become, and I'm so proud to be your father. Michael, you are a lucky man. You have a partner who will challenge you and support you and love you unconditionally. Take care of her. And to David, thank you. Thank you for being there for her when I couldn't be. Thank you for being a part of her life. Thank you for being a friend. This day is a celebration of love in all its forms. The love of a father, the love of a stepfather, the love of a mother, and the love of a husband. To Sarah and Michael, to love, to family. The room was silent for a moment, and then the applause erupted. I sat down, my hands trembling, my heart full. The tears that had been threatening to fall finally did, but they were tears of release. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't jealous. I was just a father loving his daughter, in a family that was finally whole. The music picked up after the toasts, and the dance floor filled with a mix of old and young. I watched from the sidelines, a drink in my hand, as Sarah and Michael had their first dance. They swayed to a soft, romantic melody, their eyes locked, a world of their own. The music, a classic love song, filled the air, and for a moment they were the only two people in the room. I saw Laura dancing with David, a comfortable, easy rhythm between them. They were a family, and I was a guest. But for the first time, that felt okay. I wasn't an outsider looking in. I was a part of the audience, a happy spectator to a beautiful love story. Then Sarah walked over to me. Her face was flushed with joy, her eyes shining. "Dad," she said, her voice soft and full of emotion. "Will you dance with me?" I put my drink down, my heart soaring. The pain I had felt for weeks vanished in an instant. "Of course, sweetheart." We walked to the middle of the dance floor, and the DJ, as if on cue, put on a song I hadn't heard in years. It was an old song, a classic rock ballad from my youth, a song about a father's love for his daughter. I remembered listening to it on my old car stereo, singing along with a little girl in the back seat who thought I was the strongest person in the world. My throat tightened with emotion, a mix of nostalgia and profound love. She put her hands on my shoulders, and I put my hands on her waist. We swayed to the music, a slow, gentle rhythm, a dance of two people who had been separated by time and distance, but were now connected by a love that was a universe unto itself. The gap between us, a chasm of years and missed moments, suddenly felt very small. "I love you, Dad," she said, her voice a whisper, her eyes looking into mine. "I'm sorry about the email. I should have told you. I was just scared. I was scared of hurting you, and I was scared you'd be angry and not come." "I was," I admitted, my voice hoarse. "I was angry, but I'm not anymore. I understand. David has been there for you. He deserves to be a part of this day. He's been a father to you, and I can see how much he loves you." "You deserve it too, Dad," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. "You taught me how to be strong. You taught me how to chase my dreams. You taught me how to be a good person. You've always been my hero, even when you weren't here. You were my hero from afar." Her words were a balm, a healing touch on a wound I thought would never close. She hadn't forgotten me. She hadn't replaced me. She had just found a way to make room for more love in her life. She was a woman who had the capacity to love two fathers, and that was a beautiful thing. "Your mother told me you were here for me in a way I couldn't be," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And it's true. And David, he was there in a way I couldn't be, and that's okay. We all get to be a part of your life in our own way." "Yeah," she said, a small watery smile on her face. "That's how I see it too. I'm lucky to have both of you." We danced in silence for a few more moments, the music a beautiful backdrop to a conversation that had no words. It was a dance of acceptance, of forgiveness, of a love that was deeper and more complicated than I had ever imagined. It was a dance that said, "I love you, I'm sorry, I understand, we're a family." Then the song ended. Michael walked over to us, a playful smile on his face. "May I cut in?" he said, a genuine respect in his voice. "Of course," I said, letting go of Sarah's hand. "She's all yours. And Michael, take care of her." "I will," he said, and I believed him. I watched as he took her in his arms, a beautiful couple, ready to start their life. I walked back to my table, my heart full. My role was different now. I was no longer the star of the show, but a happy spectator, a proud father in the crowd. I looked at David. He caught my eye and gave me a small, respectful nod. I nodded back. There was no need for words. We both knew. We were both fathers to the same woman, in different ways. And we were both there for her, and that's all that mattered. The night went on, a whirlwind of dancing, laughter, and celebration. I talked to family and friends, people I hadn't seen in years. I told stories, I laughed, and I was genuinely happy. The ghost of the past was gone. I was present, in the moment, in the life of my daughter. The wedding reception ended with a shower of confetti and a final song that had everyone on the dance floor. I hugged Sarah tightly, her face glowing with happiness. "I'll call you tomorrow, Dad," she said. "I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart." "So much," I said, the words feeling heavier and more meaningful than they ever had before. My voice was thick with emotion, and I had to hold back the tears. I said my goodbyes to Laura and David, a new sense of peace and understanding between us. We weren't a perfect nuclear family, but we were a family all the same. I got in my car, the quiet interior a stark contrast to the boisterous celebration I had just left. I started the long drive back to Los Angeles, the moon a bright sliver in the dark sky, a silent witness to a day of transformation. The city lights of Santa Barbara were a distant glow in my rearview mirror, a memory of a day that had changed everything. As I drove, I thought about the day, the pain, the anger, the jealousy. It all felt like a bad dream. The initial shock of the email, the bitter phone call, the raw honesty of my visit to the past. It all felt like a prelude to this moment of peace. I had come to the wedding feeling replaced, a father who had been relegated to the sidelines. But I was leaving feeling whole, a man who had been given a second chance. I had been so focused on what I had lost, the walk down the aisle, the traditional role, that I hadn't seen what I still had. I had a daughter who loved me, a daughter who wanted me in her life. I had a daughter who was happy and healthy and ready to start her own life, and that, in the end, was all that mattered. My job as a father wasn't to walk her down the aisle, it was to be there for her, through thick and thin, through the small moments and the big ones. It was to be a source of strength, of love, of support. It was to be a presence, not a ghost. It was to be the man she could count on, not just for the grand gestures, but for the quiet, everyday moments that build a life. I thought about the conversation with David, about his toast, about his quiet strength. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a villain. He was just a good man who had stepped in and filled a void I had created. He wasn't my enemy, he was my partner. And in that partnership, we were both a part of her life. We were two fathers, from different worlds, united by our love for the same woman. And in that there was a strange, beautiful harmony. I thought about the dance, the song she chose, the quiet moment of understanding between us. It was a moment that transcended time, a moment that healed a wound I thought would never close. She was my daughter, and I was her father, and no one, not even time or distance, could ever change that. I drove through the dark night, the familiar landmarks of Los Angeles beginning to appear. The city that had felt so cold and distant now felt a little more like home. I had come on a journey to a wedding, but I had ended up on a journey back to myself. I had confronted my fears, my failures, and my insecurities, and in doing so, I had found a new sense of peace. I got home, the apartment quiet and empty, but it no longer felt lonely. I looked at the picture of the gap-toothed little girl on my desk. I smiled. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She was a woman. She was a wife. And she was happy. And I was her father. My life wasn't a perfect picture. It was messy and complicated and full of imperfections, but it was real. And my love for my daughter was real. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. The dream I had of walking her down the aisle was just that, a dream. The reality, the beautiful, messy, complicated reality of her life, was 100 times better.